Move on to another development from Europe, and the UN Human Rights Chief Volker Türk has expressed outrage over Russia's ongoing large-scale attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The latest strikes, which occurred last night, have led to widespread power and heating outages in major cities like Kiev and Odessa, with temperatures dropping below -10 degrees Celsius. Millions of Ukrainians are enduring extreme cold at the moment. Türk condemned the attacks, calling them cruel and a clear violation of the laws of war. And he said civilians are bearing the brunt of these strikes, especially vulnerable groups like children, the elderly, and those with disabilities. The Russian Federation has continued these attacks since October, severely impacting Ukraine's energy grid and causing rolling blackouts across the country. Türk has called for an immediate halt to these strikes, saying it is appalling to witness the suffering of innocent civilians. Ben, of course, the winter, an Eastern European winter, of course, can even get way below 0 degrees Celsius. Under international law, do you think these attacks on energy infrastructure qualify as something like a war crime, given the amount of people they are, of course, affecting and the harm that it's causing?
It's very harsh, isn't it? And yes, you're going after civilians. And the reports coming out of Kiev a week ago, the temperatures in the buildings were like 13 degrees cold. Now they're like -2, -5. Ice is forming, that they're becoming uninhabitable, that people are setting up tents inside their apartments in order to try and keep themselves, their pets, their families, their children warm. And a humanitarian crisis is unfolding. The government has rolled out these invincibility points, which are basically sort of small huts they put up outside apartments that are heated, have power, where people can come and warm up, have a hot cup of soup, recharge their phones. And it's getting very desperate. But if it carries on, and this is the coldest winter in a decade, and if you've been to Kiev in the winter, that means -20, that's bitterly cold. Then if this carries on for a month, then Western governments here in Berlin, for example, have been warned there may be a second refugee exodus of millions of people escaping from the cold because sleeping in a -5 apartment is life-threatening. However, as to war crime, this is a complicated point, and the detractors have pointed out that NATO carried out exactly the same policy in the war in Yugoslavia and bombed flat Serbia's power stations, 80%, and gave the same justification, and saying that this would bring a war to the end, that Milosevic, if he wanted to stop it, had to concede to NATO's 5-point plan. And their argument was that because power is necessary for the military machine, that makes it a legitimate military target, and that any civilian problems, this is collateral damage, but it is ultimately justified. And so you've got a sort of certain set of double standards going on here. And interestingly, Jamie Shea, who gave a statement explaining exactly this policy, that page, which has been on the NATO website for the last 25 years, has just been taken down and is no longer available. And so this is actually kind of embarrassing, because you could argue the Russians learned this tactic from watching NATO's campaign in Serbia. So the ins and outs of war crime, if you attack civilians and kill them, then that's a war crime. But the NATO justification that power is essential to the military machine, making it a legitimate military target, I mean, I doubt this will ever go to court, but if it does, it's going to be a complicated case.
Indeed. Ben, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time in joining us here on NewsX.